This episode contains discussion about religion and explicit language. This list can also be found in the episode description. This episode is not sponsored by or affiliated with Wikipedia or the Wikimedia Foundation. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Talk Page. My name is Quinn Castaneda, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this. So, what exactly is this? Well, basically, I'm going to read Wikipedia articles with you. For topics that I know a lot about, I'm going to try to teach. It's something I don't know about. We're going to learn together. I want this to be a combination of educational and entertaining. I love learning, and I want to share this resource of free information with people, but also I want this to be fun. It won't just be verbatim reading or spewing facts. I'm going to share my opinions and ask for yours, share relevant life experience, and then just have a good time learning about random stuff. This is not an original concept. I know because when I had the idea, I looked it up to see if it has already been done, and it had. So, why should you listen to mine? Honestly, I can't really answer that. My hope is that you will find this interesting or engaging or entertaining and hopefully learn something. I'm not trying to be competition to anyone. My goal is to just share information and have fun. I've never done this before, so this is still kind of experimental and in its beginning stages, so I'd appreciate any feedback or constructive criticism or tips or anything for future episodes. A small note for anybody that's listening, I did have to switch mics midway through. If you're wondering why that beginning sounds so much better quality, yeah, I need a new microphone. But that's okay, we got this one for now, and expect that quality to get better, I promise. So other thing to note, I do want to put it out there that the episode links will vary. So some articles are stubs, so maybe you'll get an episode that's like 10 minutes, but some articles are way longer. So you'll get episodes that exceed an hour, or maybe I just have a lot of rambling or stuff to say about a particular subject, so that's just going to affect the time per episode. So yeah, just kind of a heads up there. If some of them are too long, I might split them up into multiple episodes, but I'll kind of make that judgment as it comes on. I also don't really plan on releasing these on any sort of consistent basis or schedule, so it'll probably just be honestly kind of at random when I have time or I'm inspired. I am a student, I do have other responsibilities to get along to, so this is just kind of in my spare time, and also it is time consuming not only to record, but also to edit and get everything done and ready and polished. So if for some reason I'm on top of stuff, I probably won't do more than one episode a week, but I am very much a quality over quantity kind of person, so just kind of keep that in mind. It will be pretty sporadic in terms of when these will come out. Oh, before we jump in, I do want to introduce myself to those of you that do not know me. I'm Quinn Castaneda, she, her. I'm currently a journalism master's student at DePaul University. I have a bachelor's degree in applied physics from Illinois Institute of Technology. And I have an interest in science communication and outreach, but also educating in general. So part of why I'm doing this is a way to cultivate my skills of translating and explaining complex topics into ways that are understandable to anyone. Now, Wikipedia already does a pretty good job of this, but some articles are definitely more complex than others. Some use more jargon and more technical language that aren't necessarily super beginner-friendly. And I do recognize that the simple English Wikipedia does exist, but I do want to keep kind of the same level of depth that the standard English Wikipedia uses. And yeah, I'm not a teacher or professor or anything. I'm not qualified to teach. And I'm not an expert at every topic, obviously, that I'm going to run into here. But I do kind of consider myself a jack of all trades subject-wise, and I do want to use the skills and gifts that I do have to make some sort of impact. But yeah, so while I'm not a traditional educator, I do want to do what I can. Alright, so that said, let's jump into the article for today. So in this first inaugural episode, I have chosen that the first article that we will look at is the Wikipedia article on philosophy. So I chose this for a few reasons. One of which is because of something that when I was a kid, people used to talk about called the Wikipedia game, which basically what it is you click the random article button, and based on whatever article it gives you, you have to just use the links in that article to make your way to the philosophy page. And I don't entirely remember the stat on this, but definitely a good chunk, more than 50% of the articles on Wikipedia, you can do that with and get to the philosophy page. So it's pretty impressive. And so because of that, I thought it might be fitting to start out with that article. Another disclaimer, again, remember, I am not an expert in this. I've taken some philosophy classes in undergrad and learned a few handful of, like, topics and subjects, like, things in, like, high school classes and stuff, but I am by no means an expert, so most of this will likely be kind of learning more than me teaching, so keep that in mind. I do also want to say philosophy is one of those subjects that has always been really difficult for me to like. And here's the thing about it. I want to like it. I really do. There's some concepts that are very interesting, but it's so hard for me not to, I don't know, be a cynic about it. Because philosophy really is just kind of like overthinking as a subject. So it's, I don't know, part of me is just like, I don't see the point. But like, I don't want to be a hater. I want to keep an open mind. Like, I want to like it. But also part of it is just historically, philosophy as a subject is just so whitewashed, and the basis of the subject is just like old white guys being like, oh yeah, me random old white guy figured out how the universe functions. Oh my god, I'm so smart. Listen to me. I figured it out. Me. And then another old white guy is like, oh my god, I did it. Listen to me. This is my school of thought. Because obviously I, an old white man, definitively figured out how everything functions. So listen to me. And like, it's just, you know, I know it's more nuanced than that. And there's, you know, tons of other schools of thought and philosophers that don't get the recognition they deserve. But at its core, that's kind of what it seemed like. So I don't know. Let's keep an open mind. We're going into this wanting to learn more. And again, I do want to like it. I will say, and this is not sponsored or affiliated in any way, I did recently come across a YouTuber that has done a very good job of explaining philosophy topics in a way that is actually engaging. It's Clark Eliason on YouTube. He has a handful of like video essays that are really good and actually makes this stuff make sense. So I don't know him, but I did stumble upon his channel recently, so I would definitely check it out if you have an opportunity to do so. If you want to like open it and follow along with me, you can. You also don't have to. You could just listen to me. Whatever you want. So, philosophy. And there's a disambiguation page. That's cool. Philosophy. Love of wisdom in ancient Greek. Oh, interesting. It's a systematic study of general and fundamental questions concerning topics like existence, reason, knowledge, value, mind, and language. I'm sure that is a non-exhaustive list. It is a rational and critical inquiry that reflects on its own methods and assumptions. That is a sentence. They're basically saying that it just kind of analyzes itself. Which again, that's where I like run into the like, what's the point kind of thing. Historically, many of the individual sciences, like physics and psychology, formed part of philosophy. That's true, yeah. Before they kind of broke these things up, they were all kind of one subject. And that's why all these other dudes were like multiple things. They're like, oh, I'm a philosopher and a physicist and a this and a that. But like, that's because they could do that. But they are considered separate academic disciplines in the modern sense of the term. Yeah. The main traditions in the history of philosophy include Western, Arabic Persian, Indian, and Chinese philosophy. Yep. Western philosophy originated in ancient Greece and covers a wide area of philosophical subfields. A central topic in Arabic Persian philosophy is the relation between reason and revelation. Yeah, see, I don't know a lot about these other ones, so it'd be cool to like actually learn about them. Because I think the only ones I learned in school are just the Greeks. Indian philosophy combines the spiritual problem of how to reach enlightenment with the exploration of the nature of reality and the ways of arriving at knowledge. Yeah, this kind of leads into the fact that one could argue religion is a subset of philosophy, but I mean, there's kind of aspects to both of these, right? Anyway, Chinese philosophy focuses on practical issues in relation to right, social conduct, government, and self-cultivation. And again, I'm sure these are non-exhaustive lists. Major branches of philosophy are epistemology, ethics, logic, and metaphysics. So I really only know what two of those are. Ethics being kind of the study of like what is right and wrong, like morality basically. Logic being about kind of reasoning and thinking. I really don't know enough about metaphysics or what epistemology is. Epistemology studies what knowledge is and how to acquire it. Oh, interesting, okay. Ethics investigates moral principles and what constitutes right conduct. Logic is the study of correct reasoning and explores how good arguments can be distinguished from bad ones. Metaphysics examines the most general features of reality, existence, objects, and properties. Okay, so that's kind of the, like, existential stuff. Other notable subfields are aesthetics, philosophy of language, philosophy of mind, philosophy of religion, philosophy of science, philosophy of history, and political philosophy. So aesthetics, I don't know if they'll probably go into a little bit later. Aesthetics is just kind of like the philosophy of like what is considered beautiful. So that is kind of interesting. Obviously language, mind, religion, science. Yeah, so I guess kind of everything has its own philosophy. Philosophers use a great variety of methods to arrive at philosophical knowledge. I would hope so. They include conceptual analysis, reliance on common sense and intuitions, use of thought experiments, analysis of ordinary language, description of experience, and critical questioning. Okay, well, I'm glad there's, like, maybe some thought behind it. You can't just kind of bullshit. But maybe that's just more modern now, because I feel like back in the day, they did just kind of just say stuff. By back in the day, I mean, like, ancient times. Keep that in mind. Philosophy is related to many other fields, like the sciences, mathematics, business, law, and journalism. Yeah, that's true. It provides an interdisciplinary perspective. So basically combines a bunch of fields and studies their scope and fundamental concepts. It also investigates their methods and ethical implications. And that's a good point. Ethics is an aspect of a lot of fields that I think does need to be looked at. And I could go on a separate tangent about that, but it is true that is kind of an application of philosophy in other fields, is ethics specifically. And again, that's part of why I wanted to start with this article, because I feel like philosophy, just like as a thing, does have a lot of like overlap with other subjects in ways that we probably don't even really realize either, unless we actually think about it. Yeah, and we'll kind of, get more into that as we look at more stuff. Right, etymology. So, history of the word. The word philosophy comes from the ancient Greek words, that's written in Greek, but they translate as philos, love, and sophia, wisdom. So, love of wisdom. Some sources say that the term was coined by the pre-Socratic philosopher Pythagoras, but this is not certain. Okay, so we don't actually know who coined it, number one. Pre-Socratic just means before the philosopher Socrates. Pythagoras was the guy who was more known for math, and I guess he was also a philosopher. So basically what they're saying is they think that this math guy who came before Socrates came up with the term philosophy, but they don't know that for sure. The word entered the English language primarily from Old French and Anglo-Norman starting around 1175 Common Era. The French philosophie, I think that's how it's pronounced, is itself a borrowing from the Latin philosophia. The term philosophy acquired the meanings of advanced study of the speculative subjects, logic, ethics, physics, and metaphysics, deep wisdom consisting of love of truth and virtuous living, profound learning as transmitted by the ancient writers, and the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, and the basic limits of human understanding. That is a long sentence. So basically what they're saying is that philosophy just means that you are studying you're kind of studying subjects that don't necessarily have a concrete answer, like math does, for instance. So things like logic and like metaphysics and stuff like that. It could also mean deep wisdom coming from topics like that. They're saying philosophy could also mean profound learning transmitted by ancient writers, and it could also mean the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. That's what they're saying. It's just saying philosophy has a bunch of meanings, and it could have broken that up into multiple sentences. Now, let's see, there's an image there, and it says, the caption of it just shows a bunch of pictures of Isaac Newton and drawings of him. And the caption says, physics was originally part of philosophy, like Isaac Newton's observation of how gravity affects falling apples. This is true. Before the modern age, the term philosophy was used in a wide sense, yeah. It included most forms of rational inquiry, like the individual sciences as its sub-disciplines. Which, I mean, that's still kind of true. Like, if you really think about it, everything kind of could be a subset of philosophy. For instance, natural philosophy was a major branch of philosophy. This branch of philosophy encompassed a wide range of fields, including physics, chemistry, and biology. An example of this is the 1687 book Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica by Isaac Newton. This book referred to natural philosophy in its title. Philosophiae Naturalis. But is today considered a book of physics. The meaning of philosophy changed toward the end of the modern period, when it acquired the more narrow meaning common today. Well, yeah, I mean, as other, fields kind of proliferate and get their own sense of identity, that's just kind of what's going to happen. In this new sense, the term is mainly associated with philosophical disciplines like metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Among other topics, it covers the rational study of reality, knowledge, and values. However, it is distinguished from other disciplines of rational inquiry like the empirical sciences and math. Conceptions of philosophy. See also metaphilosophy. Yeah, we'll do that another day. General conception. So, like, how it kind of came about is kind of what this section is talking about. The practice of philosophy is characterized by various general features. It's a form of rational inquiry, meaning inquiry being a questioning, so like reason-based questioning. It's a form of that. It aims to be systematic. It tends to critically reflect on its own methods and presuppositions. So it kind of reflects on itself and kind of breaks itself down. It requires thinking, quote, as hard and as clearly about some of the most interesting and enduring problems that human minds have ever encountered, end quote. According to the 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant, the task of philosophy is united by 4 questions. What can I know? What should I do? What may I hope? And what is the human being? That is a vast array of questions. I feel like the last one doesn't really fit in there. His entire career, as he conceived it, was devoted to systematically addressing these 4 questions. Wow, imagine that. The theme of self-critical intellectual humility may be traced back to the origins of Western philosophy. Self-critical, so, yeah, okay, criticizing the self intellectually to kind of be humble. That traces back to Western philosophy. Socrates, as depicted in Plato's dialogues, famously expresses incredulity when told by the oracle at Delphi that he was the wisest person of all. I think they were background. So Socrates is a Greek philosopher. Plato, another Greek philosopher. I don't remember which person was a student of who, but Plato had these dialogues that he wrote, basically just these texts. And in it, I guess Socrates is kind of a character in it. And I suppose that this fictional Socrates is told by the Oracle of Delphi that he was the wisest person of all, and that he's shocked by it. So I'm guessing what it's saying is that, like, they're supposed to kind of be humble about it. I don't think necessarily that's still the case today, but So, I mean, yeah, maybe being proven wrong about what I was saying earlier, but I guess the point is they're supposed to kind of be humble. So fictional Socrates is, like, shocked that, like, the oracle told him that he's the wisest person of all. Which the oracle at Delphi, I don't actually know how to pronounce it, and I should look that up. The oracle is just kind of a thing in Greek mythology, that was a person who would tell the future and give prophecies. So that's what that is, if you don't have that context. Alright, so what he comes to conclude, he being fictional Socrates, is that his wisdom consists in his knowing that he does not possess the most exalted kind of wisdom, namely that about what is truly fine and good. So basically he realizes that he is not the smartest person in the world, he doesn't have the most wisdom, especially when it comes to, like, morality. Consistent with his well-known assertion that the unexamined life is not worth living, Socrates arrives at the conclusion that the active pursuit of wisdom is good and valuable in itself, irrespective of whether one ever arrives at its final definitions. I kind of like that. So basically, it's like, just keep learning, bro. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. It's kind of the pursuit of wisdom is good enough, even if you kind of never get to that end or conclusion of it. This is consistent with the view that the kind of knowledge that philosophy seeks is not information, but understanding. That's a good point. So I didn't think of it like that. I'm more of an information person myself, but constructing the unlikelihood of ever arriving at final answers to the great questions of philosophy, Bertrand Russell offers this justification for nevertheless undertaking the labor. So basically what he's saying is, so I was going to give a quote. Bertrand Russell is justifying why you should do this even if you'll never get to an answer. He says, the man who has no tincture of philosophy goes through life imprisoned in the prejudices derived from common sense, from the habitual beliefs of his age or his nation, and from convictions which have grown up in his mind without the cooperation or consent of his deliberate reason. So he's saying that someone who never questions their life kind of stays in their own preconceived biases that kind of come from common sense, but also the kind of habits and beliefs that just come about from their age and where they live, and from just kind of things that have been in their mind without possibly questioning it. And there is a truth to that. Like, I think it's important to kind of, have some level of skepticism. I'm not saying question everything, but it is important to kind of, assess kind of where your preconceived notions and beliefs come from. Because the way to grow is to question things and to continue to learn and be open to that. This passage has been cited to advance an interpretation of philosophy as freeing us from prejudice, self-deceptive notions, and half-truths. Okay. Academic definitions of philosophy. Main article, definitions of philosophy. Yeah, that's not today. Attempts to define philosophy in precise terms are controversial and are studied in the subdiscipline known as metaphilosophy. Dang, they really said study in itself. Some approaches argue that there is a set of essential features shared by all parts of philosophy. Yeah, I would think. Others see only weaker family resemblances or contend that it's merely an empty blanket term. I mean, okay. Precise definitions are often only accepted by theorists belonging to a certain philosophical movement and are revisionistic, according to Soren Overgaard et al. Okay. In that many presumed parts of philosophy would not deserve the title philosophy if they were true. Okay, so y'all be nitpicky is what you're doing. Some definitions characterize philosophy in relation to its method, like pure reasoning. Others focus on its topic, for example, as the study of the biggest patterns of the world as a whole, or as the attempt to answer the big questions. Both approaches have the problem that they are usually either too wide by including non-philosophical disciplines or too narrow by excluding some philosophical subdisciplines. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's gotta be, a definition y'all agree on, right? Many definitions of philosophy emphasize its intimate relation to science. Yeah, and you can't really deny that part. In this sense, philosophy is sometimes understood as a proper science in its own right, which I would argue that it is. I would say a social science, if anything. According to some naturalistic philosophers like W.V.O. Quine, philosophy is an empirical yet abstract science that is concerned with wide-ranging empirical patterns instead of observations. Yeah. Science-based definitions usually face the problem of explaining why philosophy in its long history has not made the type of progress seen in other sciences. Yeah, because you can't really measure it. This problem is avoided by seeing philosophy as an immature or provisional science whose subdisciplines cease to be philosophy once they fully develop. That's an interesting take. In this sense, philosophy is sometimes described as the midwife of the sciences. That's a choice of phrasing. Other definitions focus on the contrast between science and philosophy. A common theme among many such conceptions is that philosophy is concerned with meaning, understanding, or the clarification of language. According to one view, philosophy is conceptual analysis, analyzing concepts, which involves finding the necessary and sufficient conditions for the application of the concepts. Phenomenologists, such as Edmund Husserl, I think, characterize philosophy as a rigorous science investigating essences. I think the phrase earlier that talked about understanding really kind of hit the nail on the head, because they're just kind of bouncing around the same idea. They practice a radical suspension of theoretical assumptions about reality in order to get back to the thing themselves, that is, as originally given in experience. They contend that this base level of experience provides the foundation for higher order theoretical knowledge, and that one needs to understand the former in order to understand the latter. Alright, that's man, that's really dense. Like, how do I break this up for y'all? I barely understand it myself, I'll be real. Alright, so basically they kind of ditch every assumption they have about reality to try to get to the core of things and kind of see things at its core, and that you need to do that in order to get to higher levels, I think is basically what it means. Another approach presents philosophy as a linguistic therapy. Okay. According to Ludwig Wittgenstein, for example, philosophy aims at dispelling misunderstandings to which humans are susceptible due to the confusing structure of natural language. Okay, so this saying is kind of getting at the core of stuff transcending language. An early approach found in ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, and later adopted by 20th century philosophers such as Michel Foucault and Pierre Hadot, is that a philosophy is the spiritual practice of developing one's rational capabilities. Okay, I mean, that's a decent definition. This practice is an expression of the philosopher's love of wisdom, and has the aim of improving one's well-being by leading a reflective life. Yeah, I mean, I'm here for that. Another definition characterizes philosophy as thinking about thinking. That's what I said earlier, right? It's overthinking as a subject. My definition wins. This emphasizes its self-critical, reflective nature. Thinking about thinking. That's philosophy. I'm start saying that. All right, history. History of philosophy has its own article, so this is just gonna kind of summarize a lot of the main points here. Alright, as a discipline, the history of philosophy aims to provide a systematic and chronological exposition of philosophical concepts and doctrine. Okay, so basically, just as a separate subject, history of philosophy is just kind of giving the history of when these philosophical concepts kind of came about. Some theorists see it as a part of intellectual history, but it also investigates questions not covered by intellectual history, such as whether the theories of past philosophers are true and have remained philosophically relevant. I feel like that's not something you can really prove. Well, maybe. The history of philosophy is primarily concerned with theories based on rational inquiry and argumentation. However, some historians understand it in a looser sense that includes myths, religious teachings, and proverbial lore. Now that to me sounds more interesting. The main traditions in the history of philosophy include Western, European basically, Arabic, Persian, Indian, and Chinese philosophy. Other influential philosophical traditions are Japanese philosophy, Latin American philosophy, and African philosophy. I would love to learn more about those. I don't know anything about them. Alright, but in this article is gonna not get into that right now. So when the subsection of history, doing Western first, because that makes sense. I do think that's kind of the bulk of what is talked about. Western philosophy has its own article. We're not doing that today, though. Western philosophy originated in ancient Greece in the 6th century before Common Era with the pre-Socratics. They attempted to provide rational explanations of the cosmos as a whole, so the universe. The philosophy following them was shaped by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Alright, so that's the order. Yeah, it says, so Socrates 469 to 399 BCE, Plato 427 to 347, and Aristotle 384 to 322. They expanded the range of topics to questions like how people should act, how to arrive at knowledge, and what the nature of reality and mind is. The later part of the ancient period was marked by the emergence of philosophical movements like Epicureanism, Stoicism, Skepticism, and Neoplatonism. The medieval period started in the 5th century CE. Its focus was on religious topics, and many thinkers used ancient philosophy to explain and further elaborate Christian doctrines. Yeah, that makes sense. There is a photo of a statue, and the caption says Statue of Aristotle, a major figure of ancient Greek philosophy, in Aristotle's park, Stagira, I believe that is in Greece. Yep. I hope I said that right. Stagira. I could be wrong. The Renaissance period started in the 14th century. Wow, we're jumping. Okay. 14th century, and saw a renewed interest in various schools of ancient philosophy, in particular Platonism. Humanism also emerged in this period. I don't know much about that. The modern period started in the 17th century. One of its central concerns was how philosophical and scientific knowledge are created. Interesting. Specific importance was given to the role of reason and sensory experience. Many of these innovations were used in the Enlightenment movement to challenge traditional authorities. Oh, yeah, I guess that would coincide with that. So the Enlightenment movement was around the 1700s, so about the time that America was declaring independence, roughly. Various attempts to develop all-inclusive systems of philosophy were made in the 19th century, for example, by German idealism. I don't know enough about that either. Influential developments in 20th century philosophy were the emergence and application of formal logic, and the focus on the role of language, as well as pragmatism and movements in continental philosophy, like phenomenology, existentialism, and postmodernism. The 20th century saw a rapid expansion of academic philosophy in terms of the number of philosophical publications and philosophers working at academic institutions. Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm wondering what is still not being discovered per se, but being come up with. I feel like at this point, it's hard to come up with like original ideas in that sense. Let's see. There was also a noticeable growth in the number of female philosophers, but they still remain underrepresented. What a shocker. I'm glad that that's growing, though. It sucks that they're still being underrepresented. Hopefully that'll change. Alright, next section. Arabic Persian, which, let's see. Islamic philosophy and Iranian philosophy also have their own oracles, which again, not today, but cool, because I don't know a lot about this. Arabic Persian philosophy arose in the early 9th century CE as a response to discussions in the Islamic theological tradition. Its classical period lasted until the 12th century and was strongly influenced by ancient Greek philosophers. Geographically, that kind of makes sense. It employed their ideas to elaborate and interpret the teachings of the Quran. Which, okay, yeah, also makes sense geographically. There is a picture here of a person, and the caption says, "An Iranian portrait of Avicenna on a silver vase. He was one of the most influential philosophers of the Islamic Golden Age." Cool. See, I've never heard of him. Let's see. Al-Kindi, 800 to 873, is usually regarded as the first philosopher of this tradition. Cool. He translated and interpreted many works of Aristotle and Neoplatonists in his attempt to show that there is a harmony between reason and faith. Oh, I like that. Avicenna, 980 to 1037, also followed this goal and developed a comprehensive philosophical system to provide a rational understanding of reality, encompassing science, religion, and mysticism. My issue with how this article is written is just kind of the name dropping with no introductions, but that's fine. Al-Ghazali, 1058 to 1111, was a strong critic of the idea that reason can arrive at a true understanding of reality and God. He was a critic of that. He formulated a detailed critique of philosophy. Interesting. And tried to assign philosophy a more limited place besides the teachings of the Quran and mystical insight. Following Al-Ghazali and the end of the classical period, the influence of philosophical inquiry waned. So I guess people's questioning just kind of stopped being important to them. Mulla Sadra, 1571 to 1636, is often regarded as one of the most influential philosophers of the subsequent period. See, I've never heard of any of these people. Like, we just aren't taught this. The increasing influence of Western thought and institutions in the 19th and 20th century gave rise to the intellectual movement of Islamic modernism, which aims to understand the relation between traditional Islamic beliefs and modernity. See, that's interesting. Yeah, and then the next section is Indian, which again, don't know, well, I guess I know little about that because it seems to be pretty closely intertwined with the like Hindu religion and those beliefs over there, but on kind of a really nitty-gritty level, I don't really know too much about it. And yeah, Indian philosophy has its own article, which we will read another day. One of the distinguishing features of Indian philosophy is that it integrates the exploration of the nature of reality, the ways of arriving at knowledge, and the spiritual question of how to reach enlightenment. It started around 900 BCE when the Vedas were written, so that's kind of like the Hindu religious texts. They are the foundational scriptures of Hinduism. Okay, yep, there it is. And contemplate issues concerning the relation between the self and ultimate reality, as well as the question of how souls are reborn based on their past actions, so reincarnation. This period also saw the emergence of non-Vedic teachings, like Buddhism and Jainism. Buddhism was founded by Gautama Siddhartha, 563 to 483 BCE, who challenged the Vedic idea of a permanent self and proposed a path to liberate oneself from suffering. Jainism was founded by Mahavira, 599 to 527 BCE, who emphasized nonviolence as well as respect toward all forms of life. I don't know anything about Jainism either, so that's good to know. The subsequent classical period started roughly 200 BCE and was characterized by the emergence of the 6 orthodox schools of Hinduism. Oh boy, let me try to pronounce these. Nyaya, Vaisesika, Samkhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. I tried my best there. The school of Advaita Vedanta later developed in this period. It was systematized by Adi Shankara at about 700 to 750 CE, who held that everything is one, and that the impression of a universe consisting of many distinct entities is an illusion. A slightly different perspective was defended by Ramanuja, 1017 to 1137, who founded the school of, I'm so sorry at my pronunciation, Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, and argued that individual identities are real as aspects or part of the underlying unity. He also helped popularize the Bhakti movement, which taught devotion toward the divine as a spiritual path and lasted until the 17th to 18th century. That's a while. The modern period began roughly 1800 and was shaped by the encounter with Western thought. The colonialism. Various philosophers tried to formulate comprehensive systems to harmonize diverse philosophical and religious teachings. For example, Swami Vivekananda, 1863 to 1902, used the teachings of Advaita Vedanta to argue that all the different religions are valid paths towards the one divine. And then Chinese philosophy having its own article as well. Another one I don't know too much about. And I guess also just the nature of how things are taught. I don't know a lot about the differences between Buddhism and Confucianism, unfortunately. So that is something I will have to look up and that we can look up together. So anyway, Chinese philosophy is particularly interested in practical questions associated with right social conduct, government, and self-cultivation. In competing attempts to resolve the politically turbulent 6th century BC, many schools of thought emerged. It's not a period of history I know too much about in China. The most prominent among them were Confucianism and Taoism. Okay. Confucianism was founded by Confucius, 551 to 479 BCE. It focused on different forms of moral virtues and explored how they lead to harmony in society. Taoism was founded by Laozi, 6th century BCE, and examined how humans can live in harmony with nature by following the Tao, or the natural order of the universe. Other influential early schools of thought were Mohism, which developed an early form of altruistic consequentialism, and legalism, which emphasized the importance of a strong state and strict laws. Oh, interesting. The altruistic consequentialism, I'm not too sure what that is. Based on just the wording of it, it sounds loosely like karma, but don't take my word for that. We will learn at some point. Let's see, there's an old picture here of an older man. It says, the teachings of Confucius on ethics and society shaped subsequent Chinese philosophy. And yeah, I can see that, and as I said earlier, it seems like there is a lot of overlap between philosophy and religion, with some developing into religions and, religions having their own philosophies and the influences of one on the other, so, which is why I'd like that is its own branch of philosophy. Buddhism was introduced to China in the 1st century CE and produced new forms of Buddhism. Starting in the 3rd century, the school of Xuanshui emerged. I'm sorry about my Chinese pronunciation too. I'm really doing my best. Tones are confusing, and it's just the romanization of the words. Anyway, it interpreted earlier Taoist works with a specific emphasis on metaphysical explanations. Neo-Confucianism developed in the 11th century. It systematized previous Confucian teachings and sought a metaphysical foundation of ethics. The modern period in Chinese philosophy began in the early 20th century. Okay, big jump between that. And was shaped by the influence of and reactions to Western philosophy. Again, colonialism. The emergence of Chinese Marxism, which focused on class struggle, socialism, and communism, resulted in a significant transformation of the political landscape. Yeah. Another development was the emergence of New Confucianism. Oh, that's different than Neo-Confucianism. Interesting. Okay. Another development was the emergence of New Confucianism, which aims to modernize and rethink Confucian teachings to explore their compatibility with democratic ideals in modern science. Alright, next section. Core branches, which there are several other articles that go, that kind of explain this thought more, and again, we will do that. Not today. Alright, so philosophical questions can be grouped into various branches. These groupings allow philosophers to focus on a set of similar topics and interact with other thinkers who are interested in the same questions. Epistemology, ethics, logic, and metaphysics are sometimes listed as the main branches. There are many other subfields besides them, and the different divisions are neither exhaustive nor mutually exclusive. Yeah, for example, political philosophy, ethics, and aesthetics are sometimes linked under the general heading of value theory as they investigate normative or evaluative aspects. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to break something like this down into distinct categories. Furthermore, philosophical inquiry meaning questioning, sometimes overlaps with other disciplines in the natural and social sciences, religion, and mathematics, which, I mean, is why, for a time, these were all considered the same thing. So, epistemology. Main article will be another time. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that studies knowledge. It's also known as theory of knowledge, and aims to understand what knowledge is, how it arises, what its limits are, and what value it has. Yeah, this one's already pretty deep. Further examines the nature of truth, belief, justification, and rationality. Some of the questions addressed by epistemologists include, by what methods can one acquire knowledge? How is truth established? And can we prove causal relations? Epistemology is primarily interested in declarative knowledge or knowledge of facts, like knowing that Princess Diana died in 1997. Okay, but it also investigates practical knowledge, like knowing how to ride a bicycle, and knowledge by acquaintance, like knowing a celebrity personally. Oh, okay. One area in epistemology is the analysis of knowledge. It assumes that declarative knowledge is a combination of different parts and attempts to identify what those parts are. An influential theory in this area claims that knowledge has 3 components. It is a belief that is justified and true. This theory is controversial, and the difficulties associated with it are known as the Gettier problem. Why is that controversial? I guess we'll find out another day. Another area in epistemology asks how people acquire knowledge. That should be easy to figure out. Okay. Often discussed sources of knowledge are perception, introspection, memory, inference, and testimony. Okay. I was thinking more like a book or Wikipedia or something like that. But okay, yeah, sure. According to empiricists, what is that? Epistemological view that holds that true knowledge or justification comes only from sensory experience. Okay. According to empiricists, all knowledge is based on some form of experience. Oh, I mean, to a degree, yes. Rationalists reject this view and hold that some forms of knowledge, like innate knowledge, are not acquired through experience. So I lean more toward that view. The regress problem is a common issue in relation to the sources of knowledge and the justification they offer. It is based on the idea that beliefs require some kind of reason or evidence to be justified. The problem is that the source of justification may itself be in need of another source of justification. Yeah, this leads to an infinite regress or circular reasoning. This idea is rejected by foundationalists who argue that some sources can provide justification without requiring justification themselves. Okay, that's what I mean. Why? Why do we care? I'm sorry. Back to... I'll stop that. Another solution is presented by coherentists, who state that a belief is justified if it coheres with other beliefs of the person. Many discussions in epistemology touch on the topic of philosophical skepticism, which raises doubts about some or all claims to knowledge. Those are the most annoying people, honestly. I'm just saying. These doubts are often based on the idea that knowledge requires absolute certainty and that humans are unable to acquire it. That's an interesting take. I think it's hard to say that humans are unable to acquire any absolute certainty in things. That's just me. Alright, ethics, which is probably one of the... Okay, this one's actually important. This is a branch of philosophy that I think actually has some of the most application to other fields, and, this is the one where I'm not questioning, why are we studying this? Because this one does hold some, if not a lot of bearings on our daily lives. The main article's ethics, if you want to learn more about that. Alright, ethics, also known as moral philosophy, studies what constitutes right conduct, so right or wrong. It is also concerned with the moral evaluation of character traits in institutions. It explores what the standards of morality are and how to live a good life. Philosophical ethics addresses such basic questions as, are moral obligations relative? Which has priority, well-being, or obligation? What gives life meaning? And yeah, these questions will have different answers and different weights based off the situation and context. Let's see, there's a picture here of John Stuart Mill, and it says, a quote by him, "The utilitarian doctrine is that happiness is desirable, and the only thing desirable as an end, all other things being only desirable as means to that end." From John Stuart Mill, from his book Utilitarianism from 1863. The main branches of ethics are meta-ethics, oh boy, normative ethics, and applied ethics. Is that just law? No, I guess ethics can be applied to everything. Meta-ethics asks abstract questions about the nature and sources of morality. It analyzes the meaning of ethical concepts like right action and obligation. It also investigates whether ethical theories can be true in an absolute sense and how to acquire knowledge of them. Normative ethics encompasses general theories of how to distinguish between right and wrong conduct. It helps guide moral decisions by examining what moral obligations and rights people have. Applied ethics studies the consequences of the general theories developed by normative ethics in specific situations, for example, in the workplace or for medical treatments. Okay. Within contemporary normative ethics, consequentialism, deontology, and virtue ethics are influential schools of thought. Consequentialists judge actions based on their consequences. Okay, straightforward. One such view is utilitarianism, which argues that actions should increase overall happiness while minimizing suffering. Yeah, I can get behind that. Deontologists judge actions based on whether they follow moral duties like abstaining from lying or killing. Okay. According to them, what matters is that actions are in tune with those duties and not what consequences they have. I don't agree with that, because the consequences may not align with moral duties. You see what anyway. Virtue theorists judge actions based on the moral character of the agent who performs them. Oh, that's also a take that I'm not really into. It really makes it seem like the moral character of a person is fixed. According to this view, actions should conform to what an ideally virtuous agent would do by manifesting virtues like generosity and honesty. Okay, sure. That's just saying act like a good person. So, I guess, yeah. Alright, logic. That's another branch. Logic is the study of correct reasoning. It aims to understand how to distinguish good from bad arguments. Yeah, it's kind of a linguistics kind of take. It is usually divided into formal and informal logic. Formal logic uses artificial languages with a precise symbolic representation to investigate arguments. Oh, what? In this way, it formulates exact criteria and methods based on the structure of arguments to determine whether they are correct or incorrect. Oh, I know what this is talking about. It's like, I don't know if anybody here ever took geometry, and for some reason, in geometry is where you learn to do like logic problems. Like, if this is true, then that is true kind of thing. That's kind of what it's talking about. Informal logic uses non-formal criteria and standards to analyze and evaluate the correctness of arguments. It relies on additional factors such as content and context. Those are important. Logic examines a variety of arguments. Deductive arguments are mainly studied by formal logic. An argument is deductively valid if the truth of its premises ensures the truth of its conclusion. So they follow a rule of inference, which has the following form. If P, then Q, therefore Q. Yeah, okay, so that's kind of what I was saying. An example is the argument, today is Sunday. If today is Sunday, then I don't have to go to work today, therefore I don't have to go to work today. The premises of non-deductive arguments also support their conclusion. However, this support is not as certain and does not guarantee that the conclusion is true. One form is inductive reasoning. It starts from a set of individual cases and uses generalization to arrive at a universal law that governs all cases. An example is that inferring that all ravens are black based on observations of many individual black ravens. Okay. Another form is abductive reasoning, which starts from an observation and concludes that the best explanation of this observation must be true. For example, when a doctor diagnoses a disease based on the observed symptoms. Okay. Logic also investigates incorrect forms of reasoning, so they're called fallacies. Yeah, very important in language. And are divided into formal and informal fallacies based on whether the source of error lies only in the argument or in the content and context. I think fallacies were super interesting. I'm definitely excited to get into those. Alright, then metaphysics. Metaphysics is the study of the most general features of reality, such as existence, objects, and their properties, wholes and their parts, space, time, events, and causation. There are disagreements about the precise definition of the term, and its meaning has changed throughout the ages. Why can't you all agree on definitions? Metaphysicists attempt to answer basic questions like, why is there something rather than nothing? Oh my god. Of what does reality ultimately consist? Are humans free? Okay, so these are the questions where I'm like, why? There's a painting of a bunch of people looking at some text, and it says the beginning of Aristotle's metaphysics in an incunabulum decorated with hand-painted miniatures. Incunabulum is a book, pamphlet, or broadside that was printed in, okay, so it's an old piece of paper. Metaphysics is sometimes divided into general metaphysics and specific or special metaphysics. Ooh. General metaphysics investigates being as such, okay, existing. It examines the features that all entities have in common. Specific metaphysics is interested in different kinds of being, the features they have, and how they differ from one another. Okay. An important area in metaphysics is ontology, which that's the study of being, which I thought that was what metaphysics was. Whatever. Some theorists identify it with general metaphysics. Okay, so what I just said. Ontology investigates concepts like being, becoming, and reality. It studies the categories of being and asks what exists on the most fundamental level. Now, I mean, physics is studying that too. Like regular physics, not metaphysics, just saying. It is interested in the essence of the world as a whole. That's what physics is doing, just saying. It asks questions like whether the universe has a beginning and an end, and whether it was created by something else. So you're delving into kind of the science-y, religious territory. A key topic in metaphysics concerns the question of whether reality only consists of physical things like matter and energy. Alternative suggestions are that mental entities like souls and experiences and abstract entities like numbers exist apart from physical things. Another topic in metaphysics concerns the problem of identity. It asks questions like how much an entity can change while still remaining the same entity. According to one view, entities have essential and accidental features. They can change their accidental features, but they cease to be the same entity if they lose an essential feature. Okay. A central distinction in metaphysics is between particulars and universals. Universals, like the color red, can exist at different locations at the same time. This is not the case for particulars like individual persons or specific objects. I mean, it's kind of neat that there's like a word for that. Other metaphysical questions are whether the past fully determines the present, and what implications this would have for the existence of free will. Okay, so what that's kind of referring to is this idea of determinism, meaning is everything predestined, or do we kind of create the future as we go, kind of thing. And there is some interesting like thought experiments that are related to this. Like something I did learn about in school was the butterfly effect, and that is kind of the idea that something that happens in the past determines the future. So if someone were to go back in time and they go back to a point in time and they change something, like killing a butterfly, for example, that singular event would completely affect what the present looks like now. So, I mean, it's an interesting thing to think of. Obviously, we can't test that, but it's interesting to speculate about. And I do think that when you're looking at something like the past objectively, like, this is what I like about history, is that you can look at the past and kind of learn from it. I mean, obviously, I can't say it from like a deterministic sense, like what this is referring to, but I think I think there is value in examining things in the past. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the areas that I think is kind of fascinating to think about, but that also delves into, I could say, religious standpoints, because people that believe different religions or don't believe a religion will likely have differing views on that. Like the idea of like God has a plan, like that is a deterministic view. Now, granted, Christianity also says that people have free will, and I understand that seems contradictory, and I can elaborate on that, not today. But that is an example of that. It's an example of this exact question. Yeah, and I don't know too much about other religions, but I think any that involves some kind of concept of an afterlife or a life after death might kind of delve into this territory. Other major branches. Yeah, so that's not even all of them. So there are many additional subfields of philosophy besides the core branches. Some of them are aesthetics, philosophy of language, philosophy of mind, philosophy of religion, philosophy of science, and political philosophy. Aesthetics, in the philosophical sense, is the field that studies the nature and appreciation of beauty and other aesthetic properties. It's often treated together with philosophy of art, but aesthetics is a broader category that encompasses other aspects of that, such as natural beauty, or what is considered natural beauty. In a general sense, aesthetics is the critical reflection of art, culture, and nature. The key question in aesthetics is whether beauty is objective or mind-dependent. This view is rejected by subjectivists who claim that beauty is not an inherent quality of objects, but depends on how people subjectively experience them. Okay. Aesthetics philosophers also investigate the nature of aesthetic experiences and judgments, like the essence of works of art and processes involving creating art. That's interesting. Like, what is considered beautiful? Like, why are some pieces of art more appealing? Why is art taught a certain way? Like, that's interesting. Philosophy of language studies the nature and function of language, the concepts of meaning and reference and truth. It aims to answer questions like how words are related to things, how language affects human thought and understanding, and is very closely related to logic and linguistics. Philosophy of language rose to particular prominence in the early 20th century due to the works of Frege and Russell. One of the central topics is to understand how sentences get their meaning. There are two broad theoretical camps, those emphasizing the formal truth conditions of sentences and those investigating circumstances that determine when it is suitable to use a sentence, the latter of which is associated with something called speech-act theory. Philosophy of mind studies the nature of mental phenomena and how they are related to the physical world. Okay. Yeah, so things like unconscious and conscious mental states, beliefs, desires, intentions, feelings, sensations, free will. I would say, overlapping with psychology a little bit. An influential intuition of philosophy of the mind is the distinction between an inner world experience of an object and the existence of this object in the outer world. The mind-body problem is the problem of explaining how matter and mind are related. The main traditional responses are materialism, which assumes matter is more fundamental, idealism, which assumes that the mind is more fundamental, and dualism, which assumes that mind and matter are distinct things. In contemporary philosophy, a widely accepted position is functionalism, which understands mental states in terms of the functional or causal roles they play. The mind-body problem is closely related to the hard problem of consciousness, which asks how the physical brain can produce qualitatively subjective experiences. Fascinating. Philosophy of religion investigates basic concepts, assumptions, and arguments with religion. It critically reflects on what religion is, how to define the divine, and whether one or more gods exist. It also includes the discussion of worldviews that reject religious doctrines. Questions addressed by philosophy of religion are: how are we to interpret religious language, if not literally? Is divine omniscience compatible with free will? So kind of that question asked earlier about determinism. Are the great variety of world religions in some way compatible in spite of their apparently contradictory theological claims? It includes topics from nearly all branches of philosophy. Yeah. It differs from theology since theological debates take place typically within one religious tradition, while debates in philosophy of religion transcend any particular set of theological assumptions. Philosophy of science examines fundamental concepts, assumptions, and problems associated with science. It reflects on what science is and how to distinguish it from a pseudoscience. It investigates the methods employed by scientists, how their application can result in knowledge, and on what assumptions they're based. It also studies the purpose and implications of science. Well, I think the purpose is similar to that of philosophy, which is kind of to know things and understand the fundamentals of the world. Some of his questions are: what counts as an adequate explanation? Is a scientific law anything more than a description of irregularity? And can some special sciences be explained entirely in the terms of a more general science? Interesting. It's a vast field that is commonly divided into the philosophy of natural science and the philosophy of the social sciences, with further subdivisions for each. How these branches are related to one another is also a question. Many of the philosophical issues overlap with the fields of metaphysics and epistemology. I would imagine also ethics as well. Political philosophy is the philosophical inquiry into the fundamental principles and ideas governing political systems and societies. This one's important. Examines the basic concepts, assumptions, and arguments in the field of politics. Look, politics affects everybody, and if you think it doesn't affect you, then that is because you benefit from it. It investigates the nature and purpose of government and compares its different forms. It further asks under what circumstances the use of political power is legitimate, rather than a form of simple violence. In this regard, it's concerned with the distribution of political power, social and material goods, as well as legal rights. Other topics are justice, liberty, equality, sovereignty, and nationalism. Political philosophy involves a general inquiry into normative matters, and differs in this respect from political science, which aims to provide empirical descriptions of actually existing states. So this is more theoretical. Political philosophy is often treated as a subfield of ethics. Schools of thought in political philosophy are liberalism, conservatism, socialism, and anarchism, just to name a few. And you would be surprised at how many different political schools of thought there are. Alright, next section, methods. This is second to last one, I think. Alright, methods of philosophy are ways of conducting philosophical inquiry. They include techniques for arriving at philosophical knowledge and justifying philosophical claims, as well as principles used for choosing between competing theories. A great variety of methods has been employed throughout the history of philosophy. Many of them differ significantly from the methods used in natural sciences, and that they don't use experimental data obtained through measuring equipment. Yeah, because you can't really measure ideas, I guess. The choice of one's method usually has important implications both for how theories are constructed and for the arguments cited for or against them. This choice is often guided by epistemological considerations about what constitutes philosophical evidence. So, like, they weren't arguing about what counts as evidence here. Methodological disagreements can cause conflicts among philosophical theories or about the answers to philosophical questions. Yeah, I can imagine things can conflict. The discovery of new methods has often had important consequences both for how philosophers conduct their research or for what claims they defend. Some philosophers engage in most of their theorizing using one particular method, while others employ a wide range of methods based on which one fits the specific problem best. Makes sense? Conceptual analysis is a common method in analytic philosophy. It aims to clarify the meaning of concepts by analyzing them into their component parts. Okay, good summary of that. Another method often employed in analytic philosophy is based on common sense. It starts with commonly accepted beliefs and tries to draw unexpected conclusions from them, which it often employs in a negative sense to criticize philosophical theories that are too far removed from how the average person sees an issue. Even then, though, one could argue that that's subjective, because, what is normalcy? What defines normal? What is the average person's behavior based off of? It is similar to how ordinary language philosophy approaches philosophical questions by investigating how ordinary language is used. Various methods in philosophy give particular importance to intuitions, that is, non-inferential impressions about the correctness of specific claims or general principles. For example, they play an important role in thought experiments, which employ counterfactual thinking to evaluate the possible consequences of an imagined situation. These anticipated consequences can then be used to confirm or refute a philosophical theory. The method of reflective equilibrium also employs intuitions. It seeks to form a coherent position on a certain issue by examining all the relevant beliefs and intuitions, some of which often have to be de-emphasized or reformulated in order to arrive at a coherent perspective. So this article also has an image here, which is an image of the trolley problem, which I'll describe that. Basically, there is a picture of a trolley on a rail, and the rail goes straight, but there is also a path on the rail that deviates a little bit to the left. There is a person next to the track with a lever, and on the straight part of the track there are 5 people, and on the other bridge of it there are 1. And the caption explains it basically saying, the trolley problem is a thought experiment that investigates the moral difference between doing and allowing harm. The issue explored in an imaginary situation in which a person can sacrifice a single person by redirecting a trolley in order to save a group of people. Yeah, so basically the trolley problem is you have this trolley that's going out of control, and you are standing at a lever, and if the trolley goes on its current path, it will hit 5 people. But if you pull the lever and switch it to the other path, it'll only kill 1. So that is kind of an example of a thought experiment examining a moral dilemma. And, and these kinds of things, one could argue, is there a correct response? And that is part of the nature of this thought experiment. Pragmatists stress the significance of concrete, practical consequences for assessing whether a philosophical theory is true. So they look at consequences. According to the pragmatic maxim as formulated by someone named Charles Sanders Peirce, the idea a person has of an object is nothing more than the totality of practical consequences they associate with this object. Okay. Pragmatists have also used this method to expose disagreements as merely verbal, that is to show they make no genuine difference on the level of consequences. Okay. Phenomenologists seek knowledge of the realm of appearance and the structure of human appearance. They insist upon the first personal character of all experience and proceed by suspending theoretical judgments about the external world. So basically their whole deal is kind of basing knowledge off of experience. This technique of phenomenological reduction is known as bracketing, or Apache, I believe that's how that's said. Maybe not. The goal is to give an unbiased description of the appearance of things. And last section, relation to other fields. Philosophy is closely related to many other fields. Yep. It is sometimes understood as a meta-discipline that clarifies their nature and limits. It does this by critically examining their basic concepts, background assumptions, and methods. In this regard, it plays a key role in providing an interdisciplinary perspective, meaning it provides a perspective that combines a bunch of different subjects. It bridges the gap between different disciplines by analyzing which concepts and problems they have in common. It shows how they overlap while also delimiting their scope. Historically, philosophy is often considered the mother of all sciences, since most of the individual sciences formed part of philosophy until they reached their status as autonomous disciplines. The influence of philosophy is felt in various fields that require difficult practical decisions. In medicine, philosophical considerations related to bioethics affect issues like, whether an embryo is already a person, under what conditions abortion is morally permissible, among other, medical ethics as well. A closely related philosophical problem is how humans should treat other animals, for example, whether it's acceptable to eat non-human animals as food or for research purposes. And that's just like one example of how ethics is applied to pretty much everything, whether that's medicine, whether that's the sciences, whether law, business, it is everywhere. And again, for good reason. I think there needs to be some sort of structure there in terms of what guides moral principles. Now then you get into the actual philosophy of what are you basing that morality off of, etc., etc. But at its core, I think it is important to address and important to be present in other disciplines. In relation to business and professional life, philosophy has contributed by providing ethical frameworks. They contain guidelines on which business practices are morally acceptable and cover the issue of corporate social responsibility. This is very important. In politics, philosophy addresses issues like how to assess whether a government policy is just. Yes. Philosophical inquiry or questioning is relevant to many fields that are concerned with what to believe and how to arrive at evidence for that belief. This is key for the sciences, which have as one of their prime objectives the creation of scientific knowledge. Scientific knowledge is based on empirical evidence, but it's often not clear whether empirical observations are neutral or already include theoretical assumptions. A closely related problem is whether the available evidence is sufficient to decide between competing theories. In the fields of theology and religion, there are many doctrines associated with the existence of nature and of God, as well as rules governing correct behavior. Yeah, and this is where it gets kind of tricky to separate the overlap between philosophy and religion. A key issue is whether a rational person should believe these doctrines. For example, whether revelation in the form of holy books and religious experiences of the divine are sufficient evidence for these beliefs. This is kind of one of those, religion versus atheism kind of arguments. A similar epistemological problem in relation to the law is what counts as evidence and how much evidence is required to find a person guilty of a crime. Related issue in journalism is how to ensure truth and objectivity when reporting on events, which is something I've taken classes on and had to learn about. Ethics is absolutely relevant in journalism, and I think it needs to be. Objectivity as a subject definitely has a lot of debate in journalism, because some argue that it is impossible to be 100% objective. And I can understand that because journalists are people and we come into things with our own natural biases, and we can only do so much to try to be objective. But I guess there is this argument of whether or not objectivity can be achieved. So I've taken classes on that, so I'm familiar with this in a journalistic context. Philosophy in the form of logic has been influential in the fields of mathematics and computer science. Yep, absolutely. Further fields influenced by philosophy include psychology, sociology, linguistics, education, and the arts. The close relationship between philosophy and other fields in the contemporary period is reflected in the fact that many philosophy graduates go on to work in these related fields rather than philosophy itself. But not to be that guy, I don't really know what jobs are out there for philosophy other than academia and being a professor. So, and I'm sorry, I don't want to be that guy. But also I come from a physics background, so as in, I have also had to face those questions. So, philosophical ideas have also prepared and shaped changes in the field of politics. For example, ideas formulated in Enlightenment philosophy, so that was 1700s, laid the foundation for constitutional democracy and played a role in the American and French revolutions. Marxist philosophy and its exposition of communism was one of the factors in the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Communist Revolution. And in India, Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence shaped the Indian independence movement. An example of the cultural and critical role of philosophy is found in its influence on the feminist movement. Okay. It has shaped the understanding of key concepts in feminism, for instance, the meaning of gender, how it differs from biological sex, and what role it plays in the formation of personal identity. Philosophers have also investigated the concepts of justice and equality and their implications with respect to the prejudicial treatment of women, so sexism, in male-dominated societies, which is a majority of societies, unfortunately. However, the idea that philosophy is useful for many aspects of life and society is sometimes rejected. According to one such view, philosophy is mainly done for its own sake and does not make significant contributions to existing practices or external goals. And I admit of having had some of that sentiment. But as I'm going through this and actively thinking about it, I can see that that's not fully true, and that it has a lot of influence and overlap in a bunch of other subjects. So I do retract whatever statements I made that do go to that conclusion. I will say I think it is definitely branch dependent, both in terms of philosophy branches, but also in terms of disciplines that it is intertwined with. So, just saying. And hey, we did it! We went through one article. We've done it. We did it. Congrats. You made it. If you have listened this far, thank you so much. This is the first time I'm doing this, so it may not be formatted like this exactly for next time, but I appreciate it. And I definitely need to work on kind of a balance of my own commentary versus direct verbatim reading, because I don't want it to be fully that. And I think for this one, that was kind of a lot of it, but I did also kind of preface this with the fact that this is not a subject that I am an expert on, which also kind of made it a little bit difficult to translate some topics here. And I think that's just how it was written, but hopefully that will be better for future articles. So I ask that you have some patience and just continue to stick around with this as I figure this out. But thank you for listening this far. If you have, I do greatly, truly appreciate it. As for the next article, haven't really decided on that yet. I might stick with the philosophy theme for a little bit. So maybe we can answer some of these questions that I had kind of going through this. And if you had any, let me know, and I can prioritize those ones to have those questions answered. Please let me know if you have any suggestions or constructive criticism or feedback or anything. I would love to know ways to make this better. I do recognize some shortcomings already, but I would like to know what other people pick up on. Like, I think I have a tendency to speak quickly, and that's something I have to catch. For instance, I am going to buy a new microphone, so it will sound better next time. And yeah, just in general, I guess, like, kind of what tone you kind of would like for this. If you like the more casual versus more formal teaching kind of thing. Like, I don't know, what vibe do y'all want? I kind of want more casual. Maybe, like, I want a good mix of both, right? But I do want to hear what people like, and I would love some feedback, and just any sort of ideas or anything. Yeah, and definitely any ideas to make this more exciting and engaging, because I realize the concept of just kind of spewing things at people, especially like words that I'm reading or half paraphrasing, that can be a bit dry. So again, any feedback or anything would be great. I want this to be enjoyable for people, and also myself. So I mean, I might disregard criticism if I don't agree with it, but I do still ask for it. I do want to know. But thank you so much. This is something I've been wanting to do for so long, and so I'm glad I'm finally getting to do it. If you enjoyed it, also, please let me know. That would be great. There is a link to this show's Instagram page in the description if you would like to follow that for updates. That's where you can also kind of comment and leave some feedback for me. Or if you're on YouTube, you can kind of comment there. Don't know if I'll be making any other social media for this. Right now it's just Instagram and Twitter. But yeah, we'll kind of see how it goes. But definitely leave feedback over there and let me know. Feel free to just, at me or comment or something. You can also follow my personal accounts. Those are also listed down there as well. And if you feel so inclined, I also have a link to a Ko-Fi page if you would like to donate. I have no plans on monetizing this. I would love to make this free for people. Wikipedia is a free resource anyway. And I'm definitely a proponent of just free knowledge and kind of free everything. I'm not a capitalist. But if you do feel compelled to leave a tip, I would definitely appreciate that. This does take time and effort to do. And unfortunately is also not free for me. Number one, I have to buy a new mic, but also the editing software I use and also the host site that I use does have a fee, just for some transparency. But only if you want to. By all means, you are not obligated to leave a tip or anything. But if you feel compelled to, I would definitely appreciate it. Oh, and also if you have any recommendations or article suggestions that you want me to get to, yeah, let me know that too. I want to interact with y'all. I want to engage. This is kind of a way for me to informally educate people, and so I don't know. Let me get to know y'all. I would love to. But yeah, again, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for supporting this, and I hope that you continue to stick around and listen to more of these when they come out. And yeah, just have a wonderful day, guys. I will talk to you guys next time.